Hello and welcome to another video, and we've got a Laney today. It's a Laney AOR A0312, A3012 Series 2. This amp's from late 80s, early 90s. It's had its speaker changed, looks like it's got Celestian greenback in it. And this amp's in for intermittent faults. And also, we don't seem to have a push-pull pot in there. We look. So we need to look at that as well. So this is a 2-channel amp, and it's push-pull on there, on the volume, and that switches in more gain or less gain. And these two, we've got these two gains here, so I presume it's a 2-channel amp. And what else we got here? We've got we've got 2 volt. We've got another volume there. We've got master volume, treble, middle with a pull boost, and bass with a pull boost, presence and reverb on there. So there's quite a bit of stuff on this amp. I do remember these from the late 80s and early 90s because I worked in a music shop at the time, and we had the dealership for these. So they did this AOR series. They did some 50-watt heads, 100-watt heads, I think. I don't particularly remember this model, but we probably did have them in. So let's have a look at the back. So we've got a couple of 6V6s there. You can see, I don't know whether they are the original tubes for when this was new. And then we've got 4 preamp tubes. I would imagine they're 12AX7s. They are, and one of those will be for the reverb, I would imagine, given that they've got that many stages. I can't believe there's 8 stages of gain, even across 2 channels. So not sure what those tubes are. Probably will be Chinese, and that one looks a bit milky around the bottom, so we'll have to test those. So yeah, let's try and have a bit of a peek in there. So you can see we've got a mains transformer there. I can just see an electrolytic poking down, and we've got the output transformer. So this should be a tidy amp, and the distortion on these was never very clever, but the clean sound's usually pretty good. So this should be a good amp. So the faults, one of the other faults it's got is it's got a bit of a background noise, and it's a strange noise. Let's see if we can plug it in and have a listen. Right, this is with all the volumes turned down. Whether you can hear that or not. The other noise you can hear is the dog wandering around the living room. So we've got that noise. That noise doesn't increase with the audio, it's totally separate. So the other thing this has got is an intermittent fault where it just dies away. But that's a tube bass, I'm pretty sure, because I had a bit of a wiggle inside and it came back, but it came back as if I'd pulled the tube out for a while and pushed it back in, and it kind of came up gradual. So I'm guessing that's a tube bass, valve bass. So we're going to get this out its case and get it on the bench, and then we can have a closer look inside at this. But I'm quite looking forward to doing this amp. I mean, it's going to be a PC board inside, but it's something a bit different. Don't see many of these. You can hear that noise is getting a bit more lively now. If we just push in there. And again, if I turn, I'll just turn all the volume. All the volumes are down. And it's still there. Strange one that. Is it in the output transformer? Is it just something simple? Is it a cap? Don't know on that one. I can't ever say I've come across that fault before. It's a strange one. But These things are sent to triers, so we're going to try and get to the bottom of that. But in the meantime, we'll start by getting it out its case. I thought we'd have a listen to this amp. I've got it out of the case. So I thought we'd just have a bit of a play. Now, I've had a look at the schematic for this amp, and it's very JCM 800 on the preamp stage. The layout of the channels is much similar. It's a bit difficult because the controls are upside down now, but I've got this on a Marshall 4x12, by the way. Some of these boost things. Now, what I have discovered since I've taken this amp out of the case is that the pull switch that's missing off the pull bright that's missing off the volume is actually on the treble, and they've actually put the pots. These pots have been put in the wrong way around at the factory, and they are factory. Strange one, really, because normally having a bright cap on the volume, you really would expect that to be on the volume. The idea of that is that if this is like a 1 meg pot, that bright cap passes the highs over it when it's turned down. When it's at its path of great resistance, as you turn it up, you get less resistance, so that you don't need the bright cap. Hence, you'd probably find that if that was the volume and a bright cap, that push pull probably wouldn't work when this volume was turned right up. That's strange. It doesn't seem to work on there either. Now, if we pull this one, then we're going into boost mode. So if we turn the master down, and I'm going to turn both these gains full up. And you can hear that's not very pleasant. But now we've moved on. I would imagine that's the channel switch. Now we've moved on to that channel. This actually works. So very strange things going on there. So let's try and set this. Now, what I had a bit of a play with this earlier, and what I discovered was that if you take most of the bass out, suddenly it begins to sound a lot better. So the problem there seems to be just too much bass. If we just back some off. get. Yeah, that's starting to already get a bit, just towards, sounding a bit farty. Now we've pulled that out. That's really trebly. So it doesn't sound very nice with that in. So this amp sounds great as long as you stay away from all these push-pull gadgets that we've got here. Start using those and it all gets a bit much. Also, the bass on this is very potent. And now we've backed off some of the distortion. You can still hear just a little bit. So if we just... So there we go, that's a bit of a listen of that. So push that back in. Let's just push this master. There, and you can notice with the volume there, we've got this sudden attack of volume when it there. Yes, a very bright and vibrant EQ. So there's a bit of a listen to it, and that's obviously before I've serviced it. So we're going to change this main electrolytic. You can see, just about see here, I don't move the camera too much. You see here, tested the tubes, they're okay. Well, the output tubes, not tested the preamp tubes. But it's certainly not showing signs of tired tubes. It's got plenty of kick. I'm going to change that. I do think that background noise could be capacitor related, so we're going to recap this amp and make a good job of it. But sounds pretty good through the 4/12, and we'll have a listen to it when I've done the service on it. So we're going to be having a look at the schematic for this and the schematic for the JCM 800, Marshall JCM 800, and just to see how close these two amps are to each other. Right, let's have a look at what caps we need to change in here. So if we hone in, so obviously we're changing that one, and we've got that here, 50 microfarad plus 50 microfarad. So we've got some 2.2s here. You probably can't see those, we probably can't get in close enough, but they're 2.2 microfarad there, and they are at, what voltage are those at? See on that one, they are 50 volts at 22 microfarad, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got one over here, which I think is on the cathode of that first stage cathode resistor. So we've got those 2.2s, and we've got a couple here which you can see. So if we just hone in on those, that's 470 microfarad at 16 volts. So I've got some caps to replace those. We've got two here which I'm not sure if they're on the bias or not. They're 10 microfarad at 100 volts. There's two of those, so we'll be replacing those. These were replaced, these are on order. These are 50 microfarad at 450, and I've ordered some 22s at 450, which will be perfect for this. These here, sorry. And then this one here is the one that we might struggle to, so I might have to order one of those, and I think that is 470 microfarad it is at 63 volts. So that's what we're going to do, change all of those. Then we're going to check the bias, clean the pots, jack sockets, usual thing, and see how we go. I've tested the tubes in this amp and they're all fine, so there's no problem with those. So it's just a matter of recapping this amp really, and it should be fine once we've recapped it. Just because these have been in a long time. Remember, this amp's from late 80s, so these have been in here, you know, 30 odd years. This time they came out, it's too long. So I've changed this cap, and that's okay. And I've just fired this amp up just to make sure, because I have this thing about doing things in stages. So I've changed that, fire it up, make sure it's fine. Then we're going to get this board up and start looking under there. Now those two caps there are for the bias, and speaking of the bias, I've just checked the bias on just on one side, just for quickness, and that side of the transformer measured 108 ohms, 1.91 volts drop across the center tap plate on the transformer, and the plate voltage is 390 volts, and that comes out at 6.89 watts, which is why I didn't bother testing the other side, because obviously that one's adjusting. I'm going to adjust that though when I've changed all the capacitors, and it'll be the last thing that I do. So this amp is only biased at 6.89 watts, which these are 12, I don't think they're 6v6s, I think those are those Russian, and I can't remember the number, and they're only at 12 watts. So where a 6v6 is 14 watts, but basically even at 12 watts there, we're just over 50%, aren't we? So that needs to come up a bit. Should be 8.4 watts, because this amp is fixed bias, it's not cathode bias. So we're looking at 8.4 watts we need to get on those. Incidentally as well, and this doesn't surprise me, when this amp was made, it had 6v6S's in, and JJ do those, and those are 14 watts dissipation. You get a bit more out of those, but they're very expensive, so we won't be ordering a pair of those. These tubes are fine, I'll just bias these at 8.4, and that'll be 70% of 12, and that should be good enough for them. So, and that's it. Should sound a bit better as well. And once we've got these caps changed that we've got here, these are on order, otherwise I'd get this amp finished. I'm just waiting for those. I've cleaned the pots and I've cleaned the jack sockets and the valve sockets, so the only thing we've got to do now is get this board up and start changing all these capacitors on it. There's the cap that I took out of this amp, and that is, by the look of that, is the 6 months of 1989. So I think he's done. I think that's just too long to leave a cap in an amp, which is why I'm changing all of these, because of the age of them. You know, 34 years old, that's too much. 20 years is really a limit on caps, but that's just too long. Right, I've got this board out, and we've had to take all the pots out there, the jack sockets, as you can see, and those sockets there are for the reverb, which we've had to take out. So now we can lift this board up to get to these capacitors. So the capacitors came this morning, and there they are. So they're 22 at 450. So those will be replacing these here. And what else? These 2.2s that you can see there, we've got those. I don't know where they are, but they're somewhere about. We've got 4 of those to replace them. These 2 are for the bias, as we checked yesterday. So those 2 are going to be replaced, and I've got 2 more there, which I think are 470 microfarad, and I've got those. So this one, this 470 at 63, I've got in axial, I think, but not in radial as far as I know. So I've got to try and have a look at that. I've got the soldering iron warming up. I'm going to swap all these caps first, and then I'm going to swap the little ones. Right, so I've got all the caps in now, but we still have that ticking noise, strange noise. So what I'm going to do is turn it over now, and I'm going to check the tubes, the valves, because I've got a feeling that could be one of the output tubes. So I've got these 2 tubes here, which we're going to swap one at a time. So we're going to find something to go in there. Incidentally, now the bias, now we've put new caps in this amp all around, the bias is slightly higher. It's still lower than it needs to be, which is why we always bias amps up when we've finished putting all the parts in them. Right, so swap this tube first. This is a Sylvania 6v6, and we're going to power this up again and just see what happens. No ticking. Well, it's not so much a ticking, but it's an interference. Right, let's put that tube back in. So can you hear that? It's not loud, but it's there. So that's with the Sylvania valve back in there. And if we have a listen, well, that's with the original tube back in, and the noise seems to have gone. I cleaned the tube sockets, so yep, silent now. So what is that? I don't know. It's intermittent. We'll have to see if it comes back, won't we? See if it returns. Not brilliantly matched, these 2 tubes at all. Right, let's turn it back over and bias and do the bias on it. Right, I've changed both of these tubes, and where that seems to have disappeared, that noise. Whether it'll come back, I don't know. I couldn't tell which one it was. It's so intermittent, so I've just swapped them both, and so far the noise has stayed away. So I'm trying to find, I've got a few 6v6s, and I'm trying to find a pair that are reasonably matched. I've got 2 in now, and there's a watts difference between them. So we're trying to see if I can get something just a bit closer than that, although that's not too bad. actually closely matched than the pair that was actually in it. I'm just waiting for it to cool down, and then I'm going to try another one. What I've got here now is the volts drop from the plate and the centre tap on this tube on the right. The last tube I put in there, that drop was 1.78. I've just put this tube in and now it's 2.5 and climbing. So you can see the difference with these tubes. Matching them up can be a real problem. Let's just see what's on the left tube. And you can see we've got 1.5, 1.6 on that left tube. So there's quite a difference there. There is a slight difference in the impedance on each side of the transformer. So I remeasured that again, and I've got 110 on the right and 92 on the left. That tube's drawing less current, but there's less resistance on there, but they are a long way out. In fact, let's just see how far out they are. So the left side's drawing 17 milliamps, which is wee low, and that dissipates at 6.6 watts. Let's try the other side, and the other side is 28 milliamps, and that is 11 watts. So that tube is drawing not far off 100%, 14 watts for a 6v6. So that's the difference in tubes, and this is why you must always put tubes in and rebias. Even with cathode bias, people say, oh, just put them in, it's cathode bias, but you must always rebias when you put tubes in. So you can see the massive difference in those two tubes. Right, I'll start with the good news. So I've tried all the other tubes in it, and the bias trim pot has reached the end of its track, and we can't get this amp quite close at all to bias, so I don't know what tubes were in this originally when it were new. So, but the good news is I found these 6v6S's. I found a pair of these, but I've put those in and the pot's bottomed out. The maximum I can get is 7 watts, and these are definitely 14 watts dissipation. These are 6v6S's. So funnily enough, and it seems to be the bane of my life, and I've actually trimmed it out. It's the old 68k pot resistor syndrome again that's turned up. I've just cut it out there. It's the old same on that Marshall, the 68k in it, and we couldn't get the bias set right. And blow me, it's turned up again. I shall be dreaming forever about 68k resistors. So I'm going to jumper a 56 in. And of course, you know what that means as well. Yet again, I'm going to have to take this board out. So yeah, so I'm going to jumper a resistor in, and then before I start filming again, I'm going to go to a dark corner and do a massive amount of swearing, and then I'll return. I've just put a 47k resistor in this now. I didn't have a 56, so I don't know why I've run out of those. Put a 47k in, and I've turned the trim pot as to cool as it is, and we were drawing about got a drop of 2 volts, and I've just shifted that up a bit, and we're drawing 7.5 watts, so I'm just going to go up a bit more. Right, so we've got about 2.85. It's fluctuating, but around that, and that's divided by the 110 on the drop, the resistance, 380 on the plate voltage, and that gives us 9.8 watts, 9.845, and that's exactly where we need to be. So 14 divided by 14 times 0.7 is 9.8 watts. So we've got that bang on. So let's just check the other side. So we've got about 2.4 volts on the other side. And that comes out at 9.9. And the reason for that is that although that voltage drop there is a lot lower, so is the resistance on the winding on the output transformer, because that's only 92 ohms, whereas on the other side we got 110. So 9.8, 9.9, that's near enough, and we're going to leave it at that. So that's the biasing done as regards the trim pot, but unfortunately we've now got to take this board out and put in this 47k resistor. In actual fact, 47k has nailed it. Let me just go back so you can see. So 47k has actually nailed this. So I'm 3/4 of the way around that trim pot. Yeah, 47k it is. Right, there we go. There's our 47k. You can see him there. He's in. And we've got, I've just checked it again just to make sure. And we've got 10 watts on the right side, or 10 watts on the nose, and 9.87 on the other side. I think that'll do me. That's just about perfect. It is. Absolutely, they are perfectly matched, and that is perfectly biased, and that is all done. And now we can plug it in and give it a blast, and I'm quite looking forward to that now, because we tested it before, we did all the work on it. Now we get to test it again. We also tested it with cold bias, so hopefully now we should get a better sound out of this amp, what with all the caps and everything we've put in it. So let's give it a blast. And the amp's turned down now. If I put this up to the speaker, very quiet. So there we go. Those tubes that I took out, I'm not sure which one of it was that was causing that problem. It seems to be the tubes, but I've just took them both out anyway. They were mismatched, and yeah, we've got some brand new 6V6S's in this, and it is a result. Right, we're looking at this schematic for this Laney, and as you can see, if we just look, if we forget this stage for a moment, and if we look at this second stage here, 2K7 680 nanofarad, 1K pot, and when we've got this cold clipper going on here, you can see with you can tell that's a cold clipper because of the 10k resistor on the cathode. We've got what have we got here? Cathode follower into the tone stack there. Now if we look at the Marshall JCM 800 and look at this section again, 0.68 2K7 there. There's the volume 10k cold clipper going on there, and then if we look, we've got this again cathode follower thing going on there for the into the EQ. So very similar preamp stage. The output stage is obviously different because we've got 6V6s in this amp as opposed to A0312s, but we're just looking at the preamp stage. So if we go back to the Laney, and now we can see that what they've actually done here that's different, they've added on this extra stage that we've got here, and that's the difference between this amp and the Marshall. Apart from this is all virtually identical, and then we've got this stage added on here. So that's where we're getting this massive amount of gain from the high channel. And you can see that the low input goes in here. Goes in there. So you can see that the low input starts virtually with in this what I call the JCM 800 circuit. The high that it starts in this first stage here, and then goes on into that what I call again the JCM 800 stage. Right, we've got this Laney up on the Marshall cab, and it's good news and bad news. So this amp originally came in for an intermittent fault, and it appears that fault has raised its head, and if we when we pull out the channel switch, it's absolutely fine. So we don't know what that is. I'm feeling there's some optocouplers for the channel switching, and I don't know whether it's those, the low channel is absolutely fine and sounds absolutely beautiful, and that is the good news on this amp. So you can see this, it's lost that thinness and boxy sound that it had before. That's probably because of the output tubes, and obviously now this amp is biased correctly, which makes a world of difference. So if we pull out the channel, we just go back into the height. That seems to have reared its head. Let's see if we can see what the overdrive is like now when it's really wound. Let's take that bass, let's take some of the bass out. Try and alter that so it's not so. distortion's much better, much tighter and crisper than it was before. So let's go into the low channel. Now when we go into the low channel, only the gain 2 works on there. Ooh, didn't expect that. It's very strange how these interact, this push-pull AOR thing that's going on there. Whoops. It ran tuned when I bought it. Very bassy on there. So we've got, and again, as I said before when we tested it last time, one of the things on this amp is it's got an incredible amount of bass. So there we have it, the Laney A0312 Series 2. Some still has got this strange intermittent fault that's reared its head. That didn't rear its head at all when we tried it the first time, but as we can see, if we go into here, and I have had quite a good look round various things with that fault. I've checked the pots and all sorts, but it always seems to come back to one of those octocouplers that's on there. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go away and find that fault, and we'll do a part 2 on this one. We'll find that fault, and then what I'm going to do is put this back in its original case with that 30-watt Celestion that it's got in there, that greenback, connect the reverb up, and then we'll have another listen to it in its own case. So we'll leave it for this one. You all take care. Thanks for watching again, and thanks for the people that subscribed. You all take care, and I'll see you all in a future video. Bye bye for now.